Good evening. We're back with another episode of the LOTR LCG Progression Series. And tonight it's a card review of the City of Corsairs, last adventure pack of this cycle. And let's take a look and see what we got here. This is the Dream Chaser cycle, the last adventure pack of the Dream Chaser cycle. After this comes the Sands of Harad expansion. Let's take a look. The hero is Prince Imrahil, a new version, a tactics version. 11 threat, 2/3/2/4 health. Combat action, spend 1 resource from Prince Imrahil to search the top 5 cards of your deck for an ally who shares at least 1 trait with him, and put that ally into play. Shuffle your deck at the end of the phase. If that ally is still in play, shuffle it into your deck. I don't think much of that ability. 1 resource for a non-permanent effect. The use of an ally for 1 turn who has to share a trait with him. It doesn't spend a card, but for your 1 resource you're going to get what? A blocker, a couple of willpower maybe, or a couple of attack. It could be better than that if you're playing high cost allies. There is one in this set, the Knight of the White Tower. His ability would be okay with that. 2 willpower, 2 attack, or 3 shields. I think this ability is a little on the weak side, and he doesn't stand on his stats alone. I actually like the leadership of him better. Leadership version of him better. So I think this hero's on the weaker side. It's expensive in terms of his threat. Doesn't provide enough of an ability to make up for his stats because it costs 1 resource every turn. There's some synergy with effects that benefit from cycling allies in and out of play. Nothing in the Gondor sphere. So, yeah. It's not like he can put a Sylvan into play every turn or something like that, or some other allies that benefit from entering and exiting play. Yeah, I think this card is on the weaker side. Its ability is expensive. 1 resource is expensive for a non-permanent effect. There are very few non-permanent effects I'm willing to pay 1 resource for. Heed the Dream is one. Yeah. Anyway, I don't consider this strong enough to play in a serious deck. If I were going to play Imrahil, because of one of the other cards in this adventure pack, Prince of Dol Amroth, I would probably play the leadership version. But I suppose if I really wanted to play Prince of Dol Amroth and I really wanted access to tactics, I might consider this version of Prince Imrahil, but otherwise, he's on the weaker side. Because of his high threat and stats that don't quite add up to enough. Knight of the White Tower, 4 cost, 2/2/3, 3 health. Knight of the White Tower's resource cost must be paid from a single hero's resource pool. Well, I like this ally at 2 cost, even 3. 4 is too expensive, especially 4 that has to be paid from a single hero. That's a slow card. It's not going to do you any good in the early game whatsoever. Would be a decent card, though, and with cost reduction, like with Vilya or something like that. I'd be happy to pull this out of the deck with Vilya. So there's probably going to be a slot for this card in some decks where you're running some form of cost reduction. Even very good tail, this would be alright with that. 3 shields on an ally is pretty good with 3 health. It's pretty good, and you get 2 willpower and 2 attack. It's just a little bit too expensive to play from hand, but if you're running cost reduction, it's not bad. Gondor synergy makes it a little better. I might run it in a Gondor deck, just to have something to do with the resources that benefits from the synergy. So this card has some uses. It's not an exceptional card, but it's a strong one. in the right context. Not just straight up playing it, though. I don't think it's too expensive for that. Hold the line. 0 cost. When an enemy attacks a player, that player may declare up to 3 eligible characters as defenders against this attack. Then, the players as a group may spend 2 tactics resources to ready each defending character that takes no damage from this attack. That's a complicated card. Seen that a lot this cycle, like complicated cards that are hard to set up with for their ideal usage. There's not going to be a lot of situations where you'd want to declare 3 eligible characters as defenders. Typically, if you have 3 characters, at least one of them is worth sacrificing so that the other 2 can attack. Now, you could also have them attack, but only the ones that take no damage, and you have to spend 2 resources to do it. That's very expensive. It's a very expensive card. I don't think it does enough even if you set it up in its ideal usage. Unless there's some challenge that doesn't exist yet or that I'm not thinking of that this would be good for, but I think that card is too complicated and doesn't do enough. Too complicated meaning not difficult to understand, but difficult to set up in its ideal scenario. Soldier of Dol Amroth. 2 cost, 0/1/1, 2 health. After Soldier of Dol Amroth enters play, reduce the cost of the next tactics card you play this phase by 1. So that would essentially reduce the cost of this card to 1 if you're going to play another tactics card this phase. So it's cost reduction out of the tactics sphere, which is off sphere, but you only get a 1/1, 0/1/1 card with 2 health. I don't really like the cards like this. There's a few others in the sets that basically allow you to get a cheap 1/1/1 out or even a free one. It's okay early game, but it doesn't scale up well. So I don't tend to play it because you draw it late, you're not happy to see this card. You draw it early, it doesn't do you any good early either because you can't play it until you have 2 tactics cards to play, which means you need more resources, at least 3. So yeah, I don't think this card is very good. I don't think I'd even run it in a Gondor deck. It is a slow card, and cheap cost reduction is only really good early. Thillion, probably not pronouncing that right. 4 cost, 3 willpower, 0 attack, 2 shields, 2 health. Spend 1 lore resource to exhaust Thillion, then each location in the staging area gets -1 threat until the end of the phase. Any player may trigger this action. Well, given that you have to exhaust her, you'd need a lot of locations in the staging area before that would make sense. Otherwise, why wouldn't you just quest with her willpower and overcome the locations that way? So I don't think the ability is useful. She's a strong questing Dunedain. That is important because Dunedain's weak on questing. So that could help with that deck. I don't think this elevates that deck to a top tier deck, but it helps. It's a decent card and a fun deck. I'd play this card in a Dunedain deck, assuming I have access to Spirit. The stats aren't good. Not good enough for 4 cost, and the ability is not useful, generally. But it is Dunedain, and Dunedain is weak on questing, and so even though it's not quite good enough for a normal deck, it's good enough for Dunedain because it covers one of their weaknesses. So I'd play it in that as a fun card, but I don't think I'd play it otherwise, unless there's some upcoming scout synergies. Yep. Fun card. Good enough to improve a fun deck a little bit. Not a top tier card. Inspiring Presence, 2 cost, choose a hero you control. Each hero with lower threat cost than the chosen hero gets +2 shields until the end of the phase. Then the players as a group may spend 2 leadership resources to give +2 attack to each hero with lower threat cost than the chosen hero until the end of the phase. Okay, well, typically you're not going to have all 3 of your heroes available for attacking. And if you do, attacking/defending, and if you do, the game's probably going pretty well, because it means you got enough allies to handle the questing. unless you're tackling a deck that doesn't require it, but that's not very common. So this is, in my view, a win more card, which is it's only really, its best case usage is when you don't need it, because things are already going really well. Like if you've got enough allies to cover the quest, generally you're already set up. If all 3 of your heroes are ready, you're already rolling and you don't really need this card. It might help you win a little faster, but win more cards are not a high priority because in the early game, when the win is uncertain, it's not going to do much because you're going to need the heroes for questing, 1 or more of them for questing. And then you can't use this card to its greatest use. Would it be good with just 1 other hero? 2 cost for 2 shields until the end of the phase? Nah, it's expensive for that. And if you used 2 cost for 2 shields and then 2 more for 2 attack instead, that's really expensive for that. So, yeah, I think this is a win more card in its best case. And its worst or mediocre case, it's not good. Guardian of Thillion, 1 cost, 0/1/0, 1 health. After Guardian of Thillion enters play, return an enemy engaged with you to the staging area. It's Gondor and a Ranger. Okay. Well, the stats don't do much. I guess it's a cheap Gondor card. Could be good in a Gondor Swarm deck if you're running lore. Generally, you don't want to return an enemy engaged with you to the staging area. There's situations where you do. Generally, you don't want to, though, because if you've got an enemy engaged with you, it's because you've chosen to engage it. And if you haven't, you're probably set up to deal with it. And if neither of those is true, then this card could be good. But if you needed to use it for that, well, you might use it early game. It's got a use, I'll say. It could be useful versus a specific challenge, or in a Gondor Swarm deck if you're running lore, but I don't think it's going to be good in every deck. It's a niche card that is generally not going to be very useful or do very much. So not likely to get a slot in many decks. Ranger Spear. 1 cost, attached to a ranger character, restricted. Attached character gets +1 attack, +2 instead when attacking an enemy with an attachment on it. Well, that's not very common at all. I can remember times when an enemy had an attachment on it, but that doesn't happen a lot. Now, is it meant for if you put an attachment on it, like traps? If it's trapped, it gets +2? Well, that's better. Is this worth a spot on a trap deck? It could be. It could be. I would consider this for a trap deck. We got a lot of traps now that attach to the enemies, but you're still going to end up engaging and fighting them. And this card could be useful in that deck. I would at least playtest it in that deck and expect it to be okay. Okay plus. Good minus. Something like that. It's not bad. It helps that deck out a bit. It's not going to make it top tier, but it helps that deck out a bit. So I'd at least playtest it in that deck, the Traps deck. It's cheap. +2 attack for 1 cost. Permanently is pretty good. And similar to other cards that we've run, Bow of the Galadrim or the Spear for Dunhere. I don't think I've run it, but I know it's decent in some situations, and Ranger Spear can perform a similar role in a trap deck. Prince of Dol Amroth. Attached to Prince Imrahil, Prince Imrahil gains the Outlands trait. While you control Outlands allies that belong to 4 different spheres, add 1 additional resource to Prince Imrahil's pool when you collect resources during the resource phase. If Prince Imrahil is a hero, so it doesn't work on his ally version. Okay, so you can give him essentially best case scenario +3/+3/+3 stats and an additional resource in the resource phase. The ideal usage scenario is quite good. Now, is it good enough to overcome its deficiencies? Number one, it's unique. Number two, it requires you to play Imrahil. And currently, in my Outlands deck, I'm running Denethor, Aristor, and Herluin. I'm not going to swap out Herluin for Imrahil. Even with this card, I'm not going to swap out Denethor. That card's too good early, especially for a Swarm archetype. So, this card is good. Prince of Dol Amroth is good on Imrahil in an Outlands deck. It is not good enough to run it over currently existing alternatives. Now, the Prince Imrahil has a leadership version. If you ran the leadership version in a Monosphere Outlands deck with Lord of Morthond, would this be good there? Yeah, absolutely, because you'd probably be running Imrahil in a Monosphere leadership deck with Outlands. And you could run Lord of Morthond for card draw instead of Aristor. And it'd be pretty good, but I don't think it'd be as good as the version I've been playing with Aristor. I think Aristor is, well, it comes with the card draw built in. And the Monosphere leadership version would require Lord of Morthond to be drawn. And that makes it a little bit worse. But it would be very interesting to play, and I might mess around with it. Like Imrahil, Denethor, and Herluin as the heroes. You'd be starting with 27 threat. That's not bad. You'd have Imrahil readying up anytime an ally leaves play. And just run the deck as it is other than that. Except putting in Prince of Dol Amroth and Lord of Morthond. Yeah, I like it. I like it in theory, and it's probably pretty strong. I don't think it's going to be quite as strong as the Aristor version, but it's going to be pretty strong and probably good enough to clear a lot of quests. I might try it. I like the Outlands right now. It seems very strong to me. Cleared a lot of quests with Outlands ever since more card draw options became available with Gandalf or Aristor. Because the weakness of Outlands was that earlier in the game, the weakness of Outlands was that it took a while to get set up. But with the additional card draw and resource generation options, that weakness has been mitigated. And it is now the strongest archetype, or strongest synergy in my opinion. Actually, a little bit dispirited by that because it's so good. I want to play other decks, but it's hard to justify it because the Outlands just clear stuff. And other decks struggle with. I'll give this a try. The Monosphere leadership deck with Imrahil, Herluin, Denethor, and Lord of Morthond and Prince of Dol Amroth. I like it in theory. Give it a try. See how it goes. In terms of whether I would recommend this adventure pack or not, I would not. Unless you're like a dedicated Gondor synergy player and you want Knight of the White Tower, or you want Knight of the White Tower for a deck with cost reduction, but be a bit of a bummer to buy the adventure pack just for that. A little unsatisfying. Unless you're a completionist or, collector. Other than that, wouldn't necessarily recommend this one. So, thanks for watching.